Today we're going to talk about the muscles of the rotator cuff. We see a lot of rotator cuff injuries. They take usually a long time to recover from. Some require surgery, some don't. But we're going to go over the four muscles, what their actions are, so you guys can start working some exercises or movements to help build the strength of the rotator cuff. Whether we have a rotator cuff injury or had a rotator cuff injury, or preventive maintenance to help prevent a rotator cuff injury. The shoulder, to start with, is the most mobile joint in the system, which also means it's, the least stable. And when that happens, especially if we're doing high intensity, a lot of work, a lot of load, we can get a lot of injuries within that. And a lot of times it's just the imbalance. So there's always a push and pull of the muscles that we talk about. Front side's pulling one way, the back side's pulling one way. And if we have a stronger side, anterior side stronger than the posterior side for most people, when we fall on the shoulder, it's very easy to kind of snap a couple of, I don't want to say snap, but we could injure, tear those muscles that are in there. So let's go over the four muscles. The four muscles that we have are the supraspinatus, the infraspinatus, the Teres Miner, and the Subscapularis. Now, where are those muscles on the shoulder? So I'm going to have Nadine just turn around. In general, when we're talking about the subscapularis, we're looking for the spine of the shoulder blade of the scapula, and which is going to run right around here, and you can kind of feel a bony prominence that runs the length. And the muscle that sits right on top of that, where we feel a lot of our traps, right up here, right underneath that is the my apologies, I'm getting all these confused. We're talking about the supraspinatus, that's sitting right on top. Supra meaning above, spinatus would be the spine. So the spine of the scapula, supraspinatus is above it and running down across here right into the shoulder. Right underneath that, we have the infraspinatus, which takes up the lower part, infra meaning below, and spinatus meaning spine, below the spine of the scapula. So that's the muscle that's over here. We have a tinier muscle that kicks in that is very important, is the Teres Miner, which kicks in right here. And finally, I'm going to have Nadine kind of lift her arm. We're going to rotate 90 degrees towards that camera. The Subscapularis, if she has her underneath on the inside of the scapula, we have the Subscapularis, and relax. Subscapularis meaning underneath or below. The scapularis meaning the scapula, so it's underneath. So the muscles pretty much tell you where their location is besides the Teres Miner, which you have to remember. Now, when we're talking about the subscapularis, the movement is in charge of the function of that is going to be raising that arm up out to the side, working for abduction, of lifting that up. It also helps create stability into the shoulder. So if we're trying to work on strengthening that, we could do movements that bring that arm out to the side. When we're dealing with rotator cuff, I'm a big fan of using very lightweight and resistance on there. Banded resistance is really good too. We're not trying to win. When we're targeting a very specific muscle, we want high volume, very lightweight. If we're looking at overall strength, which is more just like the muscle belly, then we're going to be talking, then we can get up into that heavier weight. But if we're building an individual muscle, keep that relatively lightweight, just use a light resistance band, almost feeling like you can just work this movement and have a conversation, not even really sweat, and you should feel the warming of that muscle, getting the quote-unquote pump of that muscle in there. When we do that, that's how we're going to help build the actual tendon strength of that rather than just the muscle belly. When we go on to the infraspinatus, the muscle that is below the spine of the scapula, that is also known as our handcuff muscle. So if we take our hand and bring it behind the back, it's going to externally rotate that shoulder blade. It's also going to be in charge of stability of the shoulder as well too. But that muscle right there is going to help us support the backside of the shoulder blade. So a lot of us have a hard time getting that hand in the back because we do have an injury to that rotator cuff. But as you do this movement, you're going to feel that shoulder blade really externally rotate. So we can be doing different movements through there to help kind of build the strength of the infraspinatus. Even just sweeping that arm back, we can get a little bit of the infraspinatus in that movement. We also have the Teres Miner, which is a small muscle out on the outside that helps with adduction of the shoulder as well as external rotation of the shoulder. And that's going to be kind of working very similar to the infraspinatus. A lot of the movements that you're doing at the infraspinatus can also help with the Teres Miner. So in general, as long as we're putting our shoulders through as much range of motion with high volume, light weight, we're going to be targeting those muscles. And finally, we have the Subscapularis, which is going to be in charge, since it's on the front side of the scapula, the inside of that is going to be in charge of internally rotating that shoulder, of pulling it forward into that direction as well too. All these muscles are supportive of the glenohumeral joint, and they're going to all kind of connect right around there, sometimes right in the socket of the joint on top of that too. So 4 big muscles that we have. One of the most common practices to help build the strength of the shoulder has always been the crossover symmetry. And whether you've come from a fitness background, a CrossFit world, a powerlifting world, whatever it is, crossover symmetry has always been a big name for helping build shoulders. But all you need is just some bands that have resistance, and we can just work on the range of the motion. So some of that range of motion we can do to help build the shoulder is going to be internal and external rotation. So we could pin the elbow close to the side. If I have the band tied off, we're just pulling that in. And what we should feel is the strength kicking in right here when we're doing this. We could also have the band attached on the side towards me, and we're going to create external rotation, and we can feel a little bit more on the posterior side of the shoulder working through that. We also have rotations where if we have the elbows up high and outside, and we're just rotating that arm up and all the way down. If we can go, and then we could also rotate these down. Yep, what you're going to feel. This is usually tough for a lot of people. We're not going to have a huge range of motion in this position, but we do still want to build that range of motion. So we can go all the way up, all the way down, or we can just stay at that 90, work the up portion or work the down portion. And in general, any movements that we're keeping the arms straight with resistance bands, we could be sweeping them out to the side. We could bring them up so they're shoulder height, bringing them back. And we could also change the position of our hands. So whether we're in a supinated or pronated grip, depending on which way we do, open up and close the shoulders, and you're going to work all those muscles of the shoulders. Now, you don't have to use resistance. Even just doing these without weight and just cycling the body through and creating that rotation is fine. It's a good way to start off, and don't go too heavy. That's the biggest thing that we see is people will be like, oh, we try to win at the pull. And we're trying, or we'll get the whole entire body rotating. We want to make sure that we're keeping a very slow and steady pull when we're creating that contraction on any of those muscles. We want to make sure that we're not creating the momentum, that we're going slow and then trying to pull, because now we're allowing the body to compensate. It should be tough. We are working one muscle at a time, and that is going to mean that the load is going to be very, very light. Don't try to win. Breathe through these. You should have be able to hold a full conversation with someone while you're doing these movements. No wincy faces, and try those out. You know, the rotator cuff is very complex, so we're not here to give you, hey, these are the best exercises for it. A lot of that's going to be within your pain tolerance if you are coming off a rotator cuff injury. And in general, just be in tune initially for that first time that you're doing those movements to make sure you're aware of it and not having a conversation. So try those out, try those different movements, grab a band, create some of that resistance, or just move through them without resistance. But you should be looking at 20 to 30 reps per movement on that, 2 to 3 sets if we can hammer that in. And like I said, you shouldn't be wearing out on those. But those are the 4 rotator cuff muscles. Help prevent your injury or recover from a rotator cuff injury.